So the Metropolitan Police has folded again and referred itself to the IOPC over the fact that they stopped a black man again. But not just any black man, one with some clout. Ricardo dos Santos, partner to Olympic runner Bianca Williams. We spoke about them before when they got pulled over by the police. Ricardo was driving while Bianca and the baby were in the Mercedes around 2 years ago. A clip that was shared online at the time, in my opinion, was highly edited and simply showed the police taking Bianca out of the vehicle while she was refusing to exit. As I said at the time of the incident, when Williams put out her camera footage, all it shows is that she was taken from the car. It doesn't show the seconds or minutes before or after, which I always say anyone filming should capture as much of the incident as possible and upload the full footage. And once you start, don't stop till it's over. But they won't in many cases because it might not fit with the narrative. However, I have to base my observations, my opinion, only on the available footage, which showed police pull over a vehicle, maybe a little aggressive with the cop with his window punch in his hand, but it is later said the vehicle made off from police. Albeit more likely that they just carried on driving after the police looked at them, because for some reason police seem to think that we're fucking mind readers, and when they look at us, we're supposed to pull over. Now, even still, I personally don't believe the full footage has been shared anywhere, and I do have to ask myself why, as if this was a racist incident as claimed by Bianca and Ricardo, then surely the full footage would back up that claim and put any doubts or questions to bed. Personally, I always advocate that any footage should be shared in its entirety to avoid questions such as the ones over that stop 2 years ago. But here we are with yet another incident involving Ricardo, which happened more recently, which is also being called a racist incident. Now, before I get into this, let me be clear on something. The only real issue from the police stop 2 years ago that I can tell from the footage and the subsequent reports is that the Met put the then 3-month-old baby's name on a police database called Merlin, which is used to record information on children who become known to the police and or other authorities. Now, this act was, in my own opinion, completely unnecessary and proves how police simply want intelligence. They clearly don't have much of their own. But this was also branded a racist move by the police. However, documents that are easily found online suggest that Merlin database records details of children and young adults of all ethnicities. Although this is the info I found, and without seeing it we can never be sure. But info states that reports are recorded to Merlin to enable safeguarding teams to assess any risks or harm to children based on the report and any further relevant information. These reports are often shared with partner agencies to ensure a multi-agency approach can be taken to safeguarding. Now, obviously, the stop and the search of Bianca and Ricardo on that day was not exactly a safeguarding issue for the child. In fact, the only safeguarding that needed doing was safeguarding the baby and its parents from the police. But again, although this has been classed as a racist incident, I simply don't see it from the evidence. And yes, I will get people tell me, I don't know what it's, or you don't know what it's like to be black, and you can't understand because it doesn't happen to you because of your white privilege or something like that. But I do understand evidence. And to make a claim of any kind, there needs to be some. It cannot simply be based on a person's perception, which unfortunately this whole non-crime, hate crime crap has created a wave of people abusing the fact that police will act on a perception rather than evidence, and that is wrong in my books. But back to Ricardo dos Santos. More recently, he was pulled over again, in fact, on Sunday. Now, some of you might be saying, see, twice now, it's a racial thing. But just think about what happened. Let me explain. Ricardo was out in his almost £60,000 Tesla at about 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, there's nothing illegal about being out at 4 a.m. in the morning, but unfortunately it's a bit like the witching hour for crooks, and it is more likely that burglars and robbers will be out early hours of the morning than during the day. He was travelling along the A40 Westway when a Metropolitan Police ARV say that they thought that they saw him on a mobile phone. Now, personally, I think that that is bullshit, and it simply gives them a reason to pull somebody over. The chances are they had no proof of it because they probably saw nothing of the sort, but wanted to stop a car that was out and about at 4 a.m. to check the occupants, and that's a great excuse to use. Now, there's nothing racist about that. In fact, it's a trick that is used on everyone. The ARV indicated for the vehicle to pull over by pulling around the vehicle and putting its blue lights on. It doesn't appear that the police car put its brakes on, as the brake lights don't seem to engage unless it had its foot on the anchors as it went past Ricardo, which seems like a silly thing to do as they're overtaking, but it's pulled in front of Ricardo, and to be fair, he had, I would say, two options. Stop right there in the middle of the road, or pull around and keep going. Or there could have been an accident, as the police car was pretty damn close. Now, being devil's advocate, the police obviously look at any reason to make things worse, even if they put you in that impossible situation. I think this was a pretty impossible situation, and I would have pulled around the police car too if they were doing that to me in order to prevent an accident. However, there is no footage of the police behind Dos Santos, so we don't know if the police were trying to flash him before they pulled in front, which would change my view. But we have to go on what's available in evidence. So, Dos Santos pulls around them and continues driving. He apparently keeps driving for some 5 minutes or so before pulling over. He says that that was because there was no safe place to park on the road the police tried stopping him on, saying it wasn't well lit. Although from the footage I would have to beg to differ there. But he also goes on to say that he kept driving to a more well-lit place where there could be witnesses. And I have said this many times before. If you don't feel safe, safe stopping, drive to somewhere that there are people. But I suggest that if you do, you call 999 while you're doing so and inform them that you are being pulled over, but you don't feel safe and so are not stopping till you get somewhere with more light and people. The operator will probably tell you to stop anyway, but will eventually ask some questions as to where you are. They can then call through to the police car trying to stop you, which will then prevent them from thinking you're making off. Note that you can use your mobile phone while driving if you are calling 999, and that call will be recorded for your own evidence should you need it later. So far, nothing directly that would suggest that this was a race motivated stop. Only police doing what police normally do, and Ricardo unfortunately being put in an impossible situation, and then due to being worried about being stopped based on his last encounter, decided to keep driving until he found somewhere safer to park up. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, but without being able to relay that to the police following, then they have no idea what his intentions were, and so clearly are going to assume he is trying to make off. There is also no evidence to suggest that they knew who was driving at this point. Now, I know some cars will have ANPR, but looking at the top of the BMW, it appears to be missing the usual ANPR roof-mounted cameras, although they could have been positioned elsewhere. Again, we don't know, so we have to base our opinions on the facts available and not guesswork, especially if we're going to call people racist. But due to that, it's impossible to say whether police did a vehicle check at the time before pulling Dos Santos over. Some police will do a vehicle check before, and some will wait until the vehicle is stopped first. Now, when Dos Santos finally pulls over, we only see one copper in the footage, which is unusual, to be fair, because normally they swarm like flies on shit. But for a while at least, there appears to be a single copper interacting with him before the edited footage then goes on to show another angle of several plods standing around behind the car, which is clearly, evidently, sometime after he was pulled over. And again, surprisingly, they were all standing around doing nothing. Well, maybe not surprisingly, but from my experience, they love to get in on the action and would normally all be speaking over each other in order to confuse the occupant in the vehicle in the hope that they slip up and say something they can then use against them. Again, this is normal practice for the police and not something reserved only for black folk. Granted, we cannot hear what's being said, so maybe one of the Plod Star posts said something that would indicate it was a racist motivated pull. But without that evidence, if there is any, we can't say that for sure. Now, with all that said and done, 2 years ago, Cressida Dick issued an apology to the family, but she stopped short of saying that it was a racially profiled police stop. I believe the information back then was that Ricardo drove around a traffic island on the wrong side of the road and didn't stop quickly enough. Although I haven't seen the full unedited footage of Bianca Williams' mobile phone captured device footage or the police's dash cam, so that cannot be confirmed or not in this particular report. Now, Dos Santos obviously says that this is yet another racially motivated police stop and called the police incident an aggressive traffic stop. I've got to be honest, I have seen far, far worse.
Get out of the car. Get out the car. Get out the car. You're not allowed to drive it. Get out of the car. Get out the car.
I got a license. I got a license. I got insurance.
Get out the car.
You're smashing this for no reason. Look what they're doing to my car. I got a license and insurance. Yeah. What they're doing to my car. I got a license, insurance, MOT. What's the problem, officer? Why ain't I allowed to drive the car?
You're disqualified. You're not allowed to drive.
Now that's an aggressive traffic stop. Just one of many, I might add. Now the press make a big fuss about the stop being made by armed police. However, even armed police will deal with non-violent policing issues. So the fact that they were armed, Plod, is kind of irrelevant here in my opinion, as he said he was surrounded by at least 7 police officers. Again, the footage does not show him being surrounded, but he does claim more of the footage is with his lawyer, so it could well be that that part has simply not been released yet. When the police pull him over, one of them jogs out over to his window and pulls out his baton. Again, this is pretty normal behaviour for police who are pumped up on adrenaline, especially the armed Met units, but this is not a skin colour thing, this is simply a power thing. But after the stop, Dos Santos was allowed to go on his way with no further action. Scotland Yard said that they pulled over Ricardo in his £57,000 car because they thought he was using a mobile phone. A spokesman said the armed police were on a routine patrol when they saw Ricardo and were concerned he may have been using his phone at the wheel, so asked him to pull over. They said they called for backup after he failed to pull over as requested for 5 minutes, but Ricardo claims he stopped as soon as it was safe to do so. The Metropolitan Police MELTs have now voluntarily referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct and says it is now treating the matter as a public complaint. In response to the incident on Sunday, the Metropolitan Police said, "We are aware of footage on social media showing part of a stop on a car. At about 0400 hours on Sunday the 14th of August, armed officers were on routine patrol in a marked police vehicle. They saw a car travelling eastbound on the A40 Westway and were concerned the driver may be using his mobile phone at the wheel. The officers clearly indicated for the car to pull over, but it failed to do so and they called for further assistance. The driver stopped about 5 minutes later in Orset Terrace West 2 and the officers spoke to him about why they wanted to stop the vehicle. Following the conversation, the vehicle was allowed on its way and we have since contacted the driver via Twitter to invite him to contact us if he would like to discuss this matter further." However, Ricardo didn't quite agree with the interpretation of what had happened and commented on the Met's post saying, yes, only showing parts because the rest will be with my lawyer. Also, no mention of why I took a little longer to stop. Not surprising I had to go through this again. Whilst driving home last night, 7 armed Met police officers stopped me because they thought I was on my phone whilst driving. At their request, I pulled over when safe to do so. After I stopped, 2 officers ran towards either side of the car. One fist clenched, banged on the window and tried opening the car door. Not knowing how to use a Tesla handle, he took out his baton, out of frustration, ready to smash the glass. Annoyed that 2 years down, nothing has changed, but they still manage to over-police. Why do 7 armed officers need to be present when I was alone? 2 or 3 max would have been enough. Because, Mr. Dos Santos, as if you don't already know this, the police hunt in packs. When they've got nothing to do and they hear a call over the radio, if close by, they will turn up to see if they can get their pound of flesh too. Now, the incident is being looked into to see if his complaint holds water, but knowing the police and with a new commissioner, it will be apologies all round, simply because it will be another high-profile incident. Now, I am not for one moment suggesting that the police didn't pull Ricardo over out of discrimination reasons, but so far the evidence does not support that. He does say that further footage is with his brief, which of course could hold the evidence, but, and although I dislike the police and will explain where possible where they have gone wrong, and I do believe in this incident they have definitely overreacted, Dos Santos didn't exactly help himself neither. I think the police did what they normally do. I don't agree with it, but it's the norm for the police to act in that manner towards members of the public. But I don't see the actions being any different for Ricardo than for anyone else that they would have picked on. I do note, however, that Ricardo hasn't denied using a phone in the reports that I've read anyway, although he might have in other reports. But if he was using the phone, then he should expect to get pulled over. If he did fail to stop for police for 5 minutes, then he should expect them to want their pound of flesh for not yielding to their authority immediately. And if he has dealt with the police 3 times in 2 years, as he suggests, and I'm sure he isn't a silly man, then he should know how the police react, not just to him being a black man, but to everyone. The contempt that they have for every general member of the public is evident in almost every single interaction. They are bullies, and never more so when they have nothing to do and are bored, and when they have nobody to watch over them. I think, based on what's available, that this wasn't a racially motivated stop, but of course, if evidence is produced and it transpires that I am wrong, then I will of course rectify my opinion publicly, based on the evidence. But as I say, I think the police overreacted in this. The fact they pulled in front of Dos Santos the way that they did, again, we don't know whether they were flashing him from behind, but to pull in front of somebody like that and create a situation that could have caused an accident, I would have gone round them as well. So the police created some of that situation themselves, but I don't think it was done because he was black.